And good morning, all. And for those watching the recording, um, the portion today is VaYechi. But before I clicked to start recording, Saul asked a question about how is it that there isn't anything in the Torah that reflects Jacob being surprised to hear that Joseph is alive when he was told specifically, and he sat in mourning for Joseph being killed by a wild beast. And he saw supposed evidence that his sons brought with Joseph's special coat or cloak that was dipped in blood. So the evidence was there, supposedly. And so how is it that Jacob found out the news and what happened then, and how come the brothers aren't punished, or his sons aren't punished in any way for lying to their father? So there, it's interesting that the commentary in our Eitz Chaim doesn't really reflect Saul's question. There is midrash that I'm familiar with about how the news was shared to Jacob that that Joseph is still alive, and that's an interesting midrash, based on the fact that aside from Dinah, there's only one other girl's name mentioned in the children and grandchildren of Jacob that are listed that come down to Egypt. And that one is a woman named Serach, who is the daughter of Asher. And so the rabbis create a midrash about her, that she must be a special person if she is the only woman mentioned out of all these men. There must be something special about her. So they say that she's the one who broke the news gently to Jacob that Joseph is still alive, that somehow she came up with a way to not frighten Jacob, to not cause him to have a heart attack, to be in shock or whatever, that she created a song that she sang for Jacob, and in the song she created lyrics that slowly led Jacob to understand that Joseph was still alive. So there's that kind of midrash, but there's no midrash about that tells us about Jacob being angry at his sons. So Saul, I don't have a good answer for you to reflect this. There are a lot of psychological elements to various parts of the story that just go unfulfilled, and perhaps details that would concern us might not have concerned our ancestors. Like, in other words, the way people read stories could be different over the centuries, and it's possible that I could say that perhaps the whole Bible is, and the story of the Jewish people from this moment on until the settlement in the land of Israel, until the kings, is all a commentary about how these brothers, the story here, and how Joseph and his brothers related to each other. So we have stories in the book of Joshua and Judges. We have the history recounted in Samuel and Kings about how the people of Israel, for the most part, became idolatrous and neglected in God's ways. So that could be a commentary about, or let me say it this the way the Joseph and his brothers related to each other foreshadowed events that would happen later in the Bible. And so, though the Torah might not necessarily need to tell us about how Jacob was angry, we have the rest of the Bible in which God is angry at the entire Jewish people. So you could so what I mean, one other thought about this is the story as presented here in the Torah of Jacob, the whole family of the origin family of the Jewish people. Did these stories really happen? We have no idea. Certainly, the more traditional Jewish we are, the more we think that the stories are real. But perhaps the stories were written later in history, like at the time of the kings of Israel. Perhaps the stories were written in a way that would foreshadow what was happening then at that time in history, so that perhaps then these stories become more meaningful, so that we understand it, not to read the story just at its moment in time, but to understand the story itself as a midrash about who the Jewish people are and how flawed in character they are, and how we strive to be a religious people that strives to maintain the covenant with God. Okay, so a long answer, Saul, would be that that the whole story of the book of Genesis, all 50 chapters, is a midrash about the people of Israel at the time of the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so I didn't do
Can I just say one fast thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Parsha last week was the one that when I had my second bat mitzvah at Jared Tefillah 22 years ago after I broke my hip.
Yes.
And I pulled and I did the Devar Torah and I pulled it up and I gave it again last week.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah. All right. So our portion this week is VaYechi, and I'll say the blessing: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So I wanted to look at the beginning of this week's portion, just for us to get a sense. Like, we'll read the first aliyah, see how far that takes us, and see if we can go any further than that. But I just wanted to focus on this relationship between Jacob and Joseph, and Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh.
What page, please?
So yes, we're on page 293 in the Eitz Chaim, or whatever edition of Chumash you have. It's chapter 47 of Genesis, beginning with verse 28. So there's just an interesting note here that the portion VaYechi begins, when you look at it in the Torah scroll itself, every Torah portion begins like on a new line, or at least after a break in a line. So it's clear how you can find where the portion begins. For the portion VaYechi, for some reason, there's only like a one-letter space between the end of Vayigash and before the beginning of VaYechi. And I don't know why that is, but that's just the way it is in every single Torah scroll, whether Sephardi, Ashkenazi tradition of writing it. That's the way VaYechi begins. But that's just a side note. Okay. VaYechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, Shva Esrei Shana, VaYehi Yemei Yaakov Shnei Chayav, Sheva Shanim, V'Arba'im U'Ma'at Shana. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. And the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 7 years and 140 years. So it's just a fancy way of saying that Jacob was 147 years old at this point in his life. Okay, now, do we believe that? Again, there are elements of stories throughout the book of Genesis that have us question, the authenticity of the story. So we know that people don't live to 147. Wasn't there something on the news the other day that the oldest woman in the world, 116 years old, just passed away? So, yeah. So if we're lucky, people can live that long. But 147, that just doesn't happen. So, okay. So how we answer that question, do they count years differently? Maybe. Or is this a made-up story? Maybe. And if it's a made-up story, then you want to say something about how great these figures were. And one way to show how great they were is to say how long they lived. Okay, so he lived 147 years. He was in Egypt for the last 17 years of his life. Vayikrivu Yemei Yisrael Lamut. Vayikra Livno LeYosef. Vayomer Lo. Imna matzati chen be'enecha. Simna yadcha tachat yerechi. Ve'asita imadi chesed ve'emet. Alna tikbereni be'mitzrayim. So the days of Israel drew close to die. So, another question arises from close reading of the text. Jacob lived, verse 28. Now he's called Israel. Why does it go back and forth like this? And I have no answer to this, because Abraham's name was changed, and as soon as Abraham's name was changed, it's always Abraham. It doesn't go back to Abram. It doesn't go back and forth like that. Jacob's name still goes back and forth even after his name was changed to Israel. Why? I don't know. I don't know. Could it be different strands of stories that were edited into the one story that we have in the Torah itself? And that this is a reflection, like you have the Jacob strand and the Israel strand that are combined together into the one story that we have edited in the Torah itself? I don't know, because right here, why shouldn't he be called Israel from the moment on when his name is changed? So it's just a question to bring to mind. I don't have an answer for it. So Israel's death is approaching, and he called his son Joseph. He called for his son, for Joseph, and said to him, I pray, or it's not just na, meaning please. So we're on verse 29 on page 293. It's not just please, but more of an entreaty. Usually it's you use the word na in talking to God, but it's a formality. I beg of you, I ask of you in this formal way. If I have found favor in your eyes, please put your hand, or I beg of you, to put your hand under my thigh. Abraham asked his servant Eliezer to put his hand under his thigh when Abraham asked Eliezer to go to the home country and find a woman there that would be suitable to marry Isaac. So this isn't the only time that we have that. And there's and there's a description of what exactly placing one's hand under one's thigh is. And it's could be a euphemism for the groin area, and that is an ancient way of taking an oath. And so put your hand under my thigh to take this oath, which is do for me this, it's translated as steadfast loyalty. Chesed ve'emet, steadfast loyalty. I would go with the literal translation. Do this true and compassionate thing for me. Now, chesed ve'emet is also how is the term used when we take care of the dead within the Jewish community. Taking care of the dead, all the mitzvot surrounding that, the washing and the preparation of the body, and the funeral itself are all acts of chesed ve'emet, of not steadfast loyalty, but it says down here true kindness below the line in the Eitz Chaim on 293. It says true kindness. It's the kind of kindness for which you don't receive gratitude or thank you. Okay, so there are some mitzvot that we perform, mitzvot in which we're doing acts of kindness for other people, in which we get a thank you in return. And one might think that one does these mitzvot in order to get the thank you. But in taking care of the dead, that's true kindness because there's no thank you involved. The members of the Chevra Kadisha, the group of people that take care of the deceased, of the body in preparation for the funeral, are supposed to remain anonymous. So the community can't even thank the Chevra Kadisha for doing that work. So chesed ve'emet, just one, it's used here, but it's also used in rabbinic literature and rabbinic tradition for that kind of mitzvah. So Jacob, Israel, is asking Joseph for this act of true kindness, which is, Al na, please don't bury me in Egypt. All right, so Israel is asking Joseph to swear that he will not bury Jacob, Israel, in Egypt. Okay? And he goes on in verse 30, V'shachavti im avotai, unesatani mi Mitzrayim, ukevartani bikavuratam, vayomar anochi e'eseh chid varecha. So he goes on to say, I want to lie down with my ancestors. That is, I want to be buried with my fathers, with Isaac and Abraham. Carry me up or bear me up from Egypt, kind of like what was being done to President Carter and his remains. Now, to take him up from Plains, Georgia to Atlanta on Air Force One, which technically is not supposed to be called Air Force One when it's carrying the body of a dead president. That's what I heard on the news yesterday. It's only called Air Force One when it carries living presidents or ex-presidents. So for a dead president, it's Special Mission 39. And so that's carrying President Carter from Plains, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, to the Navy Memorial, to the Capitol, and then to the Washington National Cathedral tomorrow, and then buried back in Georgia, I think. So all of that is the unesatani mi Mitzrayim, carry me up from Egypt, and the rest of the portion, later in the portion, describes how Jacob's body was carried on a chariot or some kind of cart from Egypt to Hebron to be buried. And ukavartani bikvuratam, bury me in their burial place. And that's the end of what Jacob is asking Joseph to do. And he says, Joseph replies, I will do as you have spoken, or I will do according to your words. Right? The formal reply, yes, I will. I swear I will do what you have asked me to do. And then, so now here becomes the formal swearing. Vayomer, Hishava li, Vayishava lo, Vayishtachu Yisrael al Rosh Hamita. And he said, Israel, Jacob said, swear to me. And he swore to him. And Israel bowed down at the head of the bed. So what are we supposed to picture here? The bowing. So is he in bed at the time? Not sure. Is he in a chair next to the bed? Unsure. How is he bowing down at the head of the bed? Is it bowing? Is it lying prostrate? Unclear. Okay, but there's some formal act of bowing. So above the line, it says bowed at the head of the bed. The aged patriarch, being an invalid, can make only some bodily gesture symbolic of bowing, either as a token of gratitude to Joseph or as an expression of thanks and praise to God. So we don't. So is he an invalid? We don't know that he's an invalid. Right. So it doesn't say that he's an invalid. We can assume that he is because he's 147 years old, but we don't know. We don't know. So bowing at the head of the bed, I'm not sure is about the invalid part. It could be. It could be that we're supposed to assume he's an invalid, because why else would you bow at the head of the bed? But it could be an ancient practice to also bow at the head of the bed. So, don't know. But again, just something to think about that. Okay, now in the Torah scroll, this is where there's a break between what comes before and what comes after. So, like I said, in the Torah scroll itself, the Torah portion begins with just a one-letter break from the end of the portion Vayigash to the start of the portion VaYechi. So it makes it hard to find in the text of the Torah scroll itself. Now, you see the letter Pei at the end of the Hebrew on 293? The letter Pei there, sometimes it's a letter Samech, like if you see the letter Samech on page 292. Different kind of break. So one is a line break, so that, in other words, there's some words in the line, then there's a break in the line, and then words continue in the same line. That's either a Pei or a Samech to represent that. And then you have the line ends, and the rest of the line is empty, and you start on the next line. So that's either the Pei or the Samech. So the Pei or the Samech is two kinds of line break. Okay, but the start of VaYechi, though, there you don't have a Pei or a Samech. Every other portion has a Pei or a Samech before it or at the end of the previous one to show that there's some kind of break in the Torah scroll itself. Okay, so chapter 48 now, 294. So this is the first thing that happens. Jacob realizes he's about to die, and he wants to be sure that he gets buried with his fathers in the ancient, in the family burial plot. Vayehi acharei hadvarim ha'ele, vayomer leYosef, hine avicha chole, vayikach et shnei vanav imo, et Menashe ve'et Ephraim. And so it was after these things. So was it this particular event of taking the oath in Jacob's bedroom? Or was it other events that had just happened? That is at the end of Vayigash, where the people of Israel were, the Jacob's family were allowed to settle in the land of Goshen. So what things are we coming after? So it was told to Joseph that your father is sick, And he took his two sons with him, Manasseh and Ephraim. So I'm suggesting that the beginning of our portion, verses 28 through 31, is a parenthetical note, and that the start of chapter 48 takes us back to the story of Jacob's family settling in the land of Goshen. So sometime after they get settled, word comes to Joseph that his father is not doing well. Because if we think this follows right after what the portion began, in which Jacob asks Joseph to take this oath, doesn't he see already that his father is not doing well? Why would somebody have to tell him that his father is not feeling well? Now, it just so happens to mention in the commentary, this is the first time that anybody in the Torah is described as being sick. Hinei avicha choleh, your father is sick. We have people getting old, right? Isaac's eyes drew heavy from being old, or dim from being old. Abraham became old. Other people got old, but they didn't get sick. So just something to keep in mind. So why is it? So it's just strange. Joseph just has this intimate encounter with his father. Doesn't he know already that he's sick? So why is it? So then it makes sense then, if the first verses of the portion were parentheses and somehow were put in there by an editor, and that really what was happening is that this is coming right after we're told that the people were settling in Goshen. And then at that time, so Joseph's busy. He's a busy man, figuring out how to feed the entire country of Egypt during years of drought. So it could make sense then that Joseph has to be told, your father is sick. So now he drops everything and comes with Ephraim and Manasseh to visit him. The below the line also tells us something about how we're supposed to visit the sick today. So visiting the sick, Bikur Cholim, as it's called in Hebrew, is a really important mitzvah. And in fact, the Shulchan Aruch, the digest of Jewish law from 500 years ago, describes how Bikur Cholim, how one should perform, how one should go about visiting the sick. A common time to do so would be after Shul on Shabbat, according to the Shulchan Aruch, when you would notice that people who weren't there in Shul, you would go then, after Shul was over, to the house of the person who wasn't there to check up on them and to visit them. Also, based on this, that it was announced to Joseph that his father is sick, that somehow you can't just show up. You should, out of respect for the person being sick and their family members taking care of them, give them a little bit of warning that you want to go and visit. So it's one thing if somebody's in the hospital, that for that one can go and visit somebody because you're being taken care of other people and the hospital is a public place. But if you're going to visit somebody at home, and this is something that I always do, I don't just show up at somebody's house for the family to say, oh, the rabbi's here now we have to get everything in order. I always like to make arrangements ahead of time to be sure that it's okay for me to come by and visit. Like I made arrangement to visit somebody this afternoon who is in hospice at home. And but I'm going to the hospital also this afternoon, right after class, to see somebody in the hospital. I let the family member know that I was coming to the hospital, but I didn't really need to do that. So there are different degrees of how we visit. And also when we go to visit, I also try to be sure that when I go to the hospital, to be sure that the person isn't, if they're being cared for by a nurse or something like that, I always wait out in the hall and try to find out if it's going to be a long time or a short time, because I don't want to invade that privacy at that time. It's really not right. So I always have my business card with me too, just in case I don't get in to see somebody. I can leave my card there. And the other thing is, if somebody's asleep in the hospital, I never wake them up. I never wake up somebody who's asleep in the hospital, because anybody who's been in the hospital knows that sleep is precious and patients are poked and prodded. They don't need me to poke and prod them also. So I'll leave my card at that point, and perhaps I'll recite a prayer, the Mishaberach, while they're asleep. So if I do that, perhaps the patient will wake up hearing me do that, and that'll be a gentle way of doing it. Otherwise, I don't barge into the room. I don't expect people to wake up for me, anything like that. The visiting of the sick has to reflects just the way we encounter other people. It's with humility and with respect for them. So I'm saying all of this because below the line, spend some time talking about how Joseph, it was announced to Joseph that his father is sick, and that you visit the sick by announcing your visit first. Okay, so that's verse 2. Vayaged liYaakov vayomer hine bincha Yosef ba elecha vayitchazek Yisrael vayeshev al hamita. This is the basis for it. For what I was saying, I was kind of jumping the gun. It was told to Jacob, saying that here is Joseph coming to see you, and Israel. So here in the same verse, the name changes from Jacob to Israel. Israel strengthened himself, and he sat up in bed. Like, okay, so that was the warning, so that he can look more respectable, and kind of have some sense of pride of how he's looking in front of his son and his grandsons. Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef, El Shaddai nir'a elai beluz be'eretz Canaan, vayevarech oti. So here, what we're about to see in the next couple of verses is something. Sometimes when visiting the very elderly and sick, the point of the visit is to get them to talk, and usually talk about things that happened a long time ago. So this is what Jacob is saying. Jacob is saying to Joseph, this shouldn't be the first time he told him this. This could be like the 1,000th time he's telling the story. El Shaddai, so one name of God, and this is like a personal name of God that we've had. Abraham and Isaac have used this name before, and also Jacob has used this name of El Shaddai, and it's not translated because we don't know how to translate it. But El Shaddai appeared to me in Luz, and we know that Luz is Beit El. So it's just interesting that the Torah has told us that Luz, the name Luz, has changed to Beit El. And here's another example of a name change that doesn't keep the name change. So why doesn't Jacob say to Joseph, El Shaddai appeared to me in Beit El? He says, appeared to me in Luz. And 2 times we're told in the story of Jacob earlier that Luz is the name Luz, the town, changed to Beit El. Just again, it's just interesting, these name changes and how the names don't change. So God appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan, and blessed me. Yeah, Dad, I know, you told me the story thousands of times already. Okay, but I'll hear it again. So God appeared to me in Luz, in the land of Canaan. Vayomer Elai, hineni mafracha v'hir biticha, unataticha likahal amim. Venatati et haaretz hazot lezar'acha acharecha achuzat olam. And God said to me, behold, or I'm about to make you fruitful and make you multiply. And I will make you into a congregation of nations, like a large people. And I will give you this land, not the land of Egypt, but the land of Canaan, for your descendants after you as an eternal inheritance or an everlasting possession. So Jacob's just reminding Joseph, we're down in Egypt now, but I just want you to remember this promise from God that the first time God appeared to me in Luz, this is what God promised. So we're down in Egypt now, but somehow we're going to end up back in Israel, in Canaan. Ve'ata, verse 5, Shnei vanecha hanoladim lecha be'eretz Mitzrayim ad boi elecha Mitzrayima lihem. Ephraim umenashe kir uvein v'shimon yihiu li. Now this is interesting, what he's doing here. And now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you to Egypt, they are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be like Reuben and Shimon. Now, what is he doing here? Is he adopting Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons, Jacob? Is that what he's doing? Is he elevating Ephraim and Manasseh to the status of his other sons? Well, yeah, because 2 of the 12 tribes in the land of Israel are Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, of the 12 tribes that make up the land of Israel, right? There is no tribe of Joseph. There is no Joseph landholding in Israel. There's an Ephraim and Manasseh landholding. There's no Levi landholding. So there are really 13 tribes of the tribes of Israel that settle in the land of Israel. Joseph is divided into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. Levi doesn't have a landholding. Instead of a landholding, they have 6 cities of refuge that are set up that they can live in, and the subset of Levi, the Kohanim, right? Kohen, anybody who's a Kohen is truly from the tribe of Levi. So Jews today that are around today are either from the tribe of Levi or from the tribe of Judah. And if you convert to Judaism, you convert into the tribe of Judah. So the tribe of Levi, really, that's why the genetics, the DNA of the tribe of Levi can be traced all the way back, because it's not mixed. It doesn't become mixed with anybody, with any other interminglings, like through intermarriage or anything like that. Israelites, the tribe of Judah, there are some DNA factors that are common, but it's less, because Ashkenazi, Sephardi Jews have different DNA structures. But Levi, anybody who's a Levi, Ashkenazi or Sephardi, there are some particular unique DNA structures because the tribe of Levi has stayed the same. And anyway, so long digression, but there are 13 tribes, not 12 tribes. And the tribe of Joseph, you could technically say it's the tribe of Joseph, but really the landholdings become not Joseph landholdings, but Ephraim and Manasseh landholdings. So this verse 5, kind of explains how that is, that Ephraim and Manasseh become like sons, not grandsons, but become sons to Jacob like Reuben and Shimon. Yes, Deborah.
Could somebody possibly who's converting be a Levite because of converso Jews?
Well, theoretically, but yeah.
That thought just came to me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's interesting because, there are a lot of people in Spain, for example, who have some kind of converso or pseudo-Jewish kind of things that they still do today. I think most, let's say somebody who has that kind of background, that's Spanish, or even people in New Mexico are saying that I've heard that over the years. People with that kind of background, they become interested in their possible Jewish heritage. They would need to undergo a full conversion to Judaism. I really don't know anybody who wouldn't say, "Oh, we'll count your ancestor who is possibly Jewish to make you Jewish." Yeah. So would there be some remnant Levitical DNA in them? It's possible. Who knows? We really don't know. So it's an interesting anthropological question, Deborah, and it's beyond me. I wouldn't know, and I don't have enough information in order to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah. 6. So just the emphasis here in verse 5 about how Ephraim and Manasseh become equal in status to Joseph and his brothers. Umoladetecha asher holadeta acharehem lecha yihiyu al shem achehem yikaru benachalatam. So I want to look at the English translation here because it's unclear. So moladetecha would be translated your birthplace. Lech lecha me'artzecha mimoladetecha mi beit avicha. So what God said to Abram back in chapter 12, go from your land, from your birthplace. So that's the very same form of the word, moladetecha. But here it's translated as progeny. So the leholid is to give birth. Vlad is a newborn. So it's all from, so a homeland, moledet, is the same vav lamed dalid root. Okay, so moladetecha, we know from prior usage in the Torah so far, is your birthplace. But here it's translated as your progeny. So your progeny that you will give birth to after them, that is after Ephraim and Manasseh, they will be for you on the name of their brothers, they will be called for an inheritance. That's how I'm translating it, and it's awkward. But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. They shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. So, in other words, Ephraim and Manasseh become mine. Any other children you have, Joseph, become yours. And they will take over whatever Ephraim and Manasseh were supposed to inherit from you, your other children will inherit. We don't know about other children to Joseph. We only know about Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's just a weird thing that's going on here, just to highlight the importance of Ephraim and Manasseh and their status with the rest of the people. So again, this could be, getting back to Saul's question at the beginning, this is another example, perhaps, of explaining where did Ephraim and Manasseh come from. So you have all the tribes of Israel living in the land of Israel at the time of the judges, at the time of King Saul, King David, and you have Ephraimites and Menashites. Where did the Ephraimites and Menashites come from? Okay, well, now we know Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's sons. But why would Jacob's grandchildren merit a landholding, those two, and not other grandchildren? Why not Benjamin's children? Why not Judah's children? Why don't they have landholding? So somehow, maybe this story is coming to explain to us why Ephraim and Manasseh get the land holdings and no other grandchildren do. Okay? As 7, Va'ani, now he's going back to tell the story. Tells the story of God appearing to him in Luz in the land of Canaan, promising the land of Israel to him. He stops that and says, by the way, Ephraim and Manasseh are mine, and they're going to be considered mine. And now he goes back, Va'ani, bivo'i mi padan, meta alai Rachel, be'eretz Canaan baderech, ba'od kivrat eretz lavo Ephrata, va'ekbereha sham baderech Ephrat, he Beit Lachem. And I, when I came from Padan, that is, I was coming back from Padan, going back to the land of Israel, Rachel died on me, literally, in the land of Canaan, on the road, on the way to Ephrat, which is outside of Bethlehem, and I buried her there on the road to Ephrat, which is Beit Lechem. So here, so you can understand, a 147-year-old man mind wanders and going back and forth between things, remembering first time God spoke to him, saying that out loud, then seeing the grandchildren, oh yeah, being focused again now on what's happening now. Oh, by the way, I want Ephraim and Manasseh to be considered like my kids. And then remembering again, mind wandering, remembering about Joseph's mother, Rachel, what happened to her there. And then just happening to mention there, by the way, Ephrat is also known as Bethlehem. Why he doesn't say, by the way, Luz is also known as Bethel. It's just interesting how the editor of the Torah just writes all of this. And you can kind of picture in conversations with those suffering from dementia, that conversation kind of goes back and forth, and awareness of or being focused on what's happening now, those moments of clarity go back and forth, right? As we'll see in the next sentence, verse 8, Vayar Yisrael et b'nei Yosef vayomer miyela. Israel saw the sons of Joseph, and he said, who are these? You just said Ephraim and Manasseh are your children. And now in verse 8, who are these? Okay, so it's a clever way that the Torah, I think, is trying to teach us about the mental acuity of this 147-year-old man. So who are these? 9. Vayomer Yosef el Aviv banaihem asher natan li Elohim bazeh vayomar kachem na elai va'avarachem. And Joseph says to his father, they are my sons that God has given me now. And he said, Jacob, Israel says, take them now to me so that I can bless them. You just blessed them. You just said that Ephraim and Manasseh are like your sons. And now he wants to bless them. It's just fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Okay? So it's 10 to 12. And I think we'll stop here for today. Any thoughts or comments about this before we stop? I think it's very poignant. It's just, even though, no matter when the story was it written at the time and it's being narrated as it happened? Was it written 1,000 years later? However it was written, it's presented to us in a way that kind of we can understand the age and the capability of Jacob in that moment. And I think that's pretty fascinating to be able to read somehow in a kind of a more modern kind of way that kind of reflects the sense that Jacob is an invalid rather than Jacob being a perfect person. It's important for the Torah to reflect this for us. So have a good rest of the day, everybody, and stay warm, stay safe,
Yasha Kol. Have a good day, everyone.
And have a good rest of the week.
Thank you.